I am so excited about tonight's review. For one thing, it is the first time I review a movie with Errol Flynn. And I've always wondered what's my first Errol Flynn movie going to be that I review. Clearly, I like the guy a lot. He's been in my wall for years. But also, I think Bette Davis is the greatest actress of all time. I know that's up for debate with a lot of people, but anyway, tonight's review is of The Sisters. And The Sisters came out in 1938, and it is a Warner Brothers picture, and I would classify it as a romance drama and also a period piece. Now, as I said, it stars Errol Flynn, Bette Davis. It has Anita, Louise. It has Ian Hunter, Donald Crisp, Hale. I mean, it can't be a Errol Flynn movie without Hale, can it? And also Henry Travers. It's got a bunch of actors, bunch of great actors. And I want to start out by noting that Bette Davis was really upset when Jack Warner told her that she wasn't going to be top billed in this picture. In fact, they were going to put her name under the title. It was originally going to be Errol Flynn in The Sisters with Bette Davis, blah, blah, blah. But she just threw a tantrum, so she at least got Errol Flynn and Bette Davis in The Sisters. And she joked that making it Errol Flynn in The Sisters just kind of sounded weird, especially considering Errol Flynn's reputation with women back then. So I have a lot to get through in this review, and I want to start out by saying that this movie for me it's a little spooky watching it because this movie is basically Errol Flynn's life. This is how Errol Flynn was with countless women in his life. And also I've read his autobiography. I have it on display. I highly recommend reading Errol Flynn's autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways. And he talks, and a lot of things he talks about in his autobiography just is a lot like his character Frank Medlin. But I'll get to all that when I get to the plot. Bette Davis plays Louise Elliott in this. And despite this movie being called The Sisters, I would definitely say that it pretty much centers around Bette Davis and Errol Flynn's relationship. There are a few other instances or scenes where it's about her other two sisters, but for the most part, it's about Bette Davis's life. In fact, it's kind of odd that Errol Flynn is the first name. I mean, he was a huge star at this time in 1938, so it makes sense with that regard. But the film itself is mainly centered around Bette Davis's character. She's more or less in every scene of the movie. So I also want to start out by saying this is the first movie I've watched. In fact, I'd seen this movie years ago, and I had forgotten how great it is. But I want to start out by saying that this movie is a perfect film, for me at least. So it gets 4 out of 4 stars. And the reason is because it's full of real romance. No one's perfect in this. Far from perfect with Errol. Amazing acting, great cast, amazing sets, which if you watch the movie, you'll know what I mean by that. An amazing story, a story that had me thinking about the movie long after I had watched it. In fact, I had a hard time sleeping last night because I was thinking so much about it. And just great character development, just amazing character development and amazing characters. And when I talk about the plot, I'm not going to talk much about the other sisters, but those sisters, they have very interesting stories as well. One sister marries for money, the other sister sort of marries for convenience, and Bette Davis's character, Louise, marries Frank for love. And she actually suffers the most. I would say she does for marrying for love. But I'm also going to attempt now to sort of tell the plot from fresh memory. I don't have many notes on it, but so here I go. So it takes place around like early, almost turn of the century, with Teddy Roosevelt winning the election, and I believe it's in Montana, and it's small town girls, and at this huge election, Bette Davis's character, she sees a dashing Errol Flynn who just kind of smiles at her, and just their love is born right away, just love at first sight, basically. He's a writer, and right away he's talking about his amazing life, all the places he's seen and things he's done, and she's just entranced by him. And this is how Errol Flynn really probably got women back then. But so just right away they fall for each other, and watching Errol Flynn flirt with her, I'm like, this is literally what he did with so many women back then, just his charm and his smile. And basically they end up getting married right away, and they move to San Francisco together. He's a struggling writer. He writes for a newspaper, but he has this novel. He's going to write the great American novel, but he's an alcoholic, and he hardly ever gets work done. And she's like this great woman who wants a good life. She wants, she's been raised in a good family, and he's just sort of a bum, basically. He's Errol Flynn. And he drinks, and he hates responsibility. In fact, note the scene where he comes home from work just annoyed with everything, and he's drunk, and he's just sick of it. He's sick of this come to the clean house, kiss the wife, just an ordinary routine, because this isn't Errol Flynn's character at all. This isn't Frank Medlin at all. And he's tired of this life. He's tired of work, blah, blah, blah. And he snaps at her when she's trying to touch him. Oh, my love. Oh, darling. He says, don't touch me. Like, don't help me. And then he just walks in the room, shuts the door. And at this point, Bette Davis is pregnant. And the story goes on into she loses a child, and she's just thrown in these really uncomfortable situations because she sort of married a stranger, yet she always loves him. And this is why the story centers on Bette Davis more, because it's like watching Errol Flynn self-destruct, because he is all about himself. He's really selfish, and all about, he wants the best of both worlds. He wants the married life with the beautiful wife and the job and the good husband, yet he also wants to explore the world. He wants to go to all these amazing places and have adventures, which is 1000% Errol Flynn. If you read his biography, he couldn't stay with one woman. he didn't believe in monogamy, but in this story, of course, he does. He's loyal to Louise. So anyway, we get to the point where Errol Flynn, he's had enough, and he's drunk again, and he is at a bar, and he hears these sailors talking about their adventures, and he's just jealous of it. He's tired of his life. He's tired of his wife sort of she doesn't belittle him on purpose, but he feels belittled by her. In fact, this is the first movie where Errol Flynn is not a dashing man. He's weak. He even says to Bette Davis, "You're gonna get tired of babying me." And in fact, I also wanted to mention this scene where he like wakes up late, and he's probably got a hangover, and he puts on a robe. He's like beard and everything, and his wife is going to work while he's just a bum at home. And this isn't the Errol Flynn that people would have been used to at the time, but this is the real Errol Flynn. So it's just so strange watching this movie because it's just like watching him. In fact, in his autobiography, he doesn't mention this movie, and I was really upset about that because I would have loved to have heard what his thoughts were on the sisters. Anyway, so he goes off. He leaves his wife. He writes her a letter and pieces out to go live his new life of seeing the world and stuff. And she's just devastated. And at one point, there's even the great earthquake in San Francisco, and this Warner Brothers tried to create this awesome, crazy scene of the earthquake and make it horrifying, but it just did not compare to the earthquake that was in San Francisco with Clark Gable. That movie was made a couple years before this, in 1936. I wish I had reviewed that movie. I watched that during law school, and the earthquake scene, and that is just horrifying. It is incredible. And the earthquake scene in this movie doesn't even compare, yet they spent $200,000, which was so much money on this scene. But just note that scene. So that happens while Errol's gone. And spoiler, huge, I mean, it's the end. Errol comes back 2 years later, and in the original book, and they originally shot it this way, in the original book, he doesn't end up back with Bette Davis. She ends up with Ian Hunter because she has a new life. Ian Hunter's a good man. Errol Flynn is not a good person, not a good man. And Donald Crisp convinces Errol Flynn, look, you're toxic for her. You need to let her live her life and be good how she is, because she's probably been depressed and struggling to get over you all this time. And Errol Flynn's selfish. He's saying, no, it's my wife. I want to be back with her. Like, leave me alone. I want my beautiful wife. Well, audiences didn't like that ending. They wanted her to be with Errol Flynn, so they refilmed the scene, and Errol Flynn ends up with Bette Davis at the end, a changed man. But regardless of this sort of happy ending, I still give the movie a perfect 4 out of 4, because I like the ending. But I could see a world where it would be like a 3 and a 0.75 stars, but I still think it's a perfect movie. I love this movie. So I have some pictures from the movie. I knew this was going to be a long review because, I mean, it's just perfect. Also, I wanted to note how odd of a pairing Errol Flynn and Bette Davis is, but strangely it works because they're opposites. She's like type A and he's like the opposite. He's a bum, but their chemistry worked. So if you're still watching, I have a lot to read about the movie, that things that Bette said about the film. I was delighted with this part because it was a change of pace. Remember, this was a little bit after Jezebel, so she was getting really big at this time. My ambition always has been and still is for variety in the kinds of parts that I play. My career has proved this. I was always challenged by a new type of person to play. Besides the principles, blah, 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 blah. I was extremely happy to be co-starred for the first time with Errol Flynn. So surprising. He was a big box office star at this time, and it could only be beneficial to me to work with him. At that time, I had no billing clause in my contract. I felt after Jezebel that my name should always appear above the title. That is star billing. Warner Bros. Decided to bill Errol Flynn as the sole star. Errol Flynn in The Sisters with Bette Davis. My name below the title. Not only did I feel that Errol Flynn in The Sisters had its humorous, even far-out connotation, I I always felt that The Sisters was a female star's title. I agree. After taking a very definite stand with the studio, the billing read Errol, Flynn, Bette Davis, and The Sisters. She got her way. So, oh dear, how many films have I been in that I have suffered from the change by the studio of the ending? She's talking about the ending, how they changed it. There's always the honest ending to any story. I fought for many honest endings. Sometimes was able to prove my point, often was defeated. Those in charge of studios changing endings after a film was finished as often as they changed titles, but detrimental to our work in the film. And both she and Errol agreed that it ended wrong, that they shouldn't have ended back together, because there's another picture. So, another thing I have about the ending. This is not at all a happy ending, she said, because it would be out of character for Frank to become a steadfast husband. That would be as foolish as thinking Errol Flynn would make a long-time husband. Who would be so foolish? Well, Louise, my character, would have, of course. Louise is a romantic and believes, or at least hopes, it will be permanent. It was a very Bette Davis thing to do. Romantic foolishness is almost certainly doomed. The Flynn character would never change. He couldn't even if he wanted to, and he certainly didn't want to. My character was a romantic fool like me. I totally agree. Frank would never change. Errol Flynn would never change. The last thing I have is so Bette Davis. Okay. On set about Errol, I confused him utterly. One day he smiled that cocky smile and looked directly at me. I'd love to proposition you, Bette, but I'm afraid you'd laugh at me. I never missed the rare opportunity to agree with a man. You're so right, Errol. He bit his lip, waved his arm through the air, and bowed in mock chivalry like Captain Blood. He was extremely graceful in retreat. That was Errol Flynn trying to get in bed with Bette Davis. Surprise, surprise. But she turned him down. Good for her. Here's a beautiful picture of her being photographed for the role. And one last picture of actually Bette Davis with her two sisters, which, like I said, that was not really what the movie's about. It's not really about her sisters. Not really. It's mainly about she and Frank. Whew, we got through this long review, but I'm glad it was a long review because it was a perfect movie for me. Let me know what you think of it. This is sadly going to be my last review for a few weeks because this is sort of an announcement, because I'm taking the law bar exam in 3 weeks, so I won't really have time to do this hobby of mine. But please give me good luck because it's the hardest thing I've ever done. But after the bar, we'll get back into making more reviews. I love you all, and send me good vibes, and you'll see me soon. But take care, everyone.